From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The task of succeeding President Lula is challenging. I will know how to honor this legacy.
Rousseff, Brazil's first female president, sworn into office. She was a guerrilla resisting Brazil's military dictatorship in the 1960s. She was imprisoned and tortured for 2 years. We'll speak about her historic inauguration. As we turn now internationally, look south to Brazil, which has made history with the swearing-in of its first female president. On Saturday, Dilma Rousseff received the presidential sash from outgoing President Lula da Silva at a ceremony in the capital of Brasilia. In her inaugural speech, Rousseff paid tribute to Lula and repeated her pledge to eradicate chronic poverty in Brazil.
I will fight for the necessary changes in education, in health and security, and, above all, I will fight to end poverty and misery.
Dilma Rousseff spoke before tens of thousands of supporters at the presidential palace. 2 Brazilian women reflected on the significance of her inauguration.
I hope this will be a great moment for Brazil and for all of us women who have been waiting a long, long time for this moment.
For many years we have dreamed of this historic moment, a woman who is a fighter taking over the presidency of a country like Brazil. And today we are here to see Dilma walking up the ramp with the presidential sash. This is also our fight. This is a victory for the Brazilian people.
During the 1960s and 70s, Rousseff was a guerrilla. She was involved in the armed struggle against Brazil's military dictatorship. She was imprisoned for nearly 3 years and tortured. Joining her at the inauguration were 11 women with whom she was imprisoned during that time. Other attendees included Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. They shook hands. Lula leaves office after an 8-year run that saw him become the most popular Brazilian president in the country's history. A former trade unionist, he was the first presidential nominee to win for the Workers' Party in Brazil, known as the PT, and the first working-class leader of Latin America's biggest country. During his 2 terms, some 20 million Brazilians were lifted out of poverty, and Brazil's minimum wage increased by more than half. As Lula's hand-picked successor and his former chief of staff, Dilma Rousseff is expected to continue many of his policies. To discuss Rousseff's historic inauguration and what her presidency means for Brazil, we're joined here in New York by Greg Grandin, professor of Latin American history at New York University, author of Empire's Workshop, Latin America, the United States and the Rise of the New Imperialism. His most recent book, Fordlandia, was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in History. Welcome to Democracy Now! Why don't you give us the biography of this, well, remarkable new president of Brazil? Her history is astounding.
Yeah, arguably the most powerful woman in the world. She was born in 1947. She's 63 years old in the provinces, a middle-class family, lower middle class. Her father was a Bulgarian immigrant, a mother a Brazilian school teacher, and she came of age during a time when the middle class could actually develop a social consciousness, a political consciousness. Her mother had her read Zola and Dostoevsky. The nuns at a school introduced her to rural poverty, urban poverty, and she became political at an early age. And when she was 16 years old, she joined a political faction that had split off from the Communist Party to work with urban workers. And then with the coups in Brazil, there was one coup in '64 and then a much more radical right-wing coup in '68. She became much more politicized herself. She joined an urban guerrilla group in probably in 1967, 68, and she was arrested in 1970. And just over the last couple of months, documents have been declassified in Brazil that illustrate that she suffered widespread torture, extreme torture, electric torture. She was released after a little bit less than 3 years, and she went on to get a degree in economics, and she entered politics, and first in the state of Porto Alegre and then in Rio Grande do Sul. And she developed a reputation as an extremely efficient economist and administrator, particularly around energy issues. When she was the Minister of Energy in Rio Grande in the 1990s, you can think of her as being the anti-Enron, where Enron speculated and basically turned energy into a big gaming initiative in the United States and led to rolling blackouts in California. She did the exact opposite. She built a public infrastructure. She invested heavily. She consolidated the notion that energy was a common good, public good, and then she joined the Workers' Party around 2000 and became Lula's chief of staff in 2000.
The first woman chief of staff.
Yeah, well, first she was Ministry of Energy, and she was involved in overseeing Petrobras, Brazil's public oil company, over the course of Lula's 2 administrations. But first she was Minister of Energy on a national level, and then she became chief of staff in 2004, I believe, early on, in about the middle of Lula's first term, after a series of scandals pushed out Lula's first chief of staff, and has been described as Lula's prime minister. There's no prime minister officially in Brazil, but basically an executor of domestic policy, particularly around energy. And
she also had cancer.
She did. She overcame and apparently triumphed over lymphoma, serious form of cancer, and this was caught after she had already announced for the presidency, and apparently is in remission.
So talk about how she became the president of Brazil.
Well, Lula is enormously popular, and she was Lula's hand-picked successor, basically. She, as I said, she was Lula's right-hand woman. She was very close, and they developed a very close bond. And and Lula's enormous popularity is going out of office with 80% popular approval ratings, and internationally he has basically changed the rules of the interstate system on a number of levels, which we could talk about, certainly in the Americas. And so he threw his enormous weight behind her.
I want to go to a clip of Lula, the outgoing Brazilian president, Lula da Silva, who broke into tears during his farewell address.
Back then I was worried. What was my concern? Was I ready to rule this country? Was I prepared to deal with everything? Sometimes I would lie down next to my wife in the government's palace and I would say, Marisa, I wonder if this is real, if we are actually here. We are sleeping in the room on the same bed that so many presidents have slept. On this bed, Marisa, is this actually real? If I fail, it would be the workers' class which would be failing. It would be the country's poor who would be proving they did not have what it takes to rule.
That was the outgoing president of Brazil, Lula. And now it's Dilma Rousseff, the first woman president of Brazil.
Andar tranquilamente na favela onde eu nasci, e poder me orgulhar, e ter a consciência que o pobre tem seu lugar. Vem Deus, DJ! Eu só quero é ser feliz, andar tranquilamente na favela onde eu nasci, e poder me orgulhar, e ter a consciência que o pobre tem seu lugar. Mas eu só quero é ser feliz, 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 onde eu nasci, e poder me orgulhar, e ter a consciência que o pobre tem seu lugar.